Welcome to Curious Confessions, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Before we unravel tonight's eerie encounter, it would mean a lot to me if you light up that like button and subscribe. Because in this place, curiosity isn't just encouraged, it's essential. Ready to uncover the next confession? Let's begin. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule: don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6, and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the two strange things here: the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either. But good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually, it's small things, winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, you know, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good, and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad. But the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat, and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum. It came and it went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring them macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Ms. Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who is always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The 3 of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way, he's really nice." Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then. Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't. See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key, he continued, ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain. So, I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next. Because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years, because he knew we took it seriously. So, after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom. And on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds. Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola! I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face. But I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her. Don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. Holden? I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips. colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lip so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment. An old, ugly terror stitched on his face, a parent's fear. "Just Holden," he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." Thud, thud, thud. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Thud, thud, thud. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think—" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap. 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 "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police. Call. The police." Tap, tap, tap. "Police." My mom pulled us closer. "Police. Police. Police. Police." "Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back to front, loud, then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once, or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, The knocking came back, so loud it was possible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room, and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. "Okay," he told us. "It's done." Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim, but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room, Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe, or share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night. Would I have looked too, to comfort her, to share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. It's crazy what some people will put up with for a little bit of money. Desperate times, I suppose. Well, I am one of those desperate people. Desperation to get my daughter a life-saving medical treatment is what drove me to where I am now. That same desperation has led to daily fear of what might happen next to Danny and I, now that it's over. I had no choice. I needed money right away. I couldn't qualify for a loan, and the damn insurance company said the treatment was not authorized under our policy. My work was barely paying over minimum wage, and I still needed almost $5,000. The only way this would work is if I got another job working graveyard somewhere else, at least until I could save enough to get her the treatment. Danny was all I had left. I already lost her mother a year ago in that car crash. I couldn't lose her too. I looked high and low. I combed the classifieds and drove around desperately searching for a job that could pay what I needed and have an available night shift as well. The prospect seemed hopeless, but I had to find something soon. The town we lived in was small, and the prospect seemed bleak. That was when, in a streak of what felt like luck at the time, I inquired about a job at a small grocery store about a mile away from where we live. It was called Shivers Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It was an odd little store that was closed during the day and seemed to open at around 8 p.m. and close sometime before morning. The weird hours seemed off, and I didn't know who would want to shop at a store that was only open in the middle of the night when there were 24-hour chains elsewhere. Though it did not really matter, it was a store. I needed a job, and the unique hours in this case would work for the schedule I needed. I decided to try and apply for a job there. I was on my way home after finishing a shift at my day job. My friend Kathy was nice enough to watch Danny while I was working, and and had even agreed to do so if I found a graveyard shift somewhere else as well, at least for a month or two if needed. Since I had seen the odd shop and saw the hours, I decided to inquire about a job at the lonesome and odd little store that seemed to only be open at night. I was reluctant at first, since I thought they might have some illicit reasons to only be open at such hours. Despite my misgivings, I realized it was the best hope I had of getting a job with my minimal skill set, and that was a guaranteed graveyard shift. I got out of my car and walked up to the entrance. The place was pretty run down, but seemed to still have signage up and around the front. There were sale signs and clearance items advertised, and the somewhat normal facade of a grocery store made me relax and continue with my intended course. I noticed up close there was a mark under the first part of the store name, shivers. It looked like Japanese kanji or something. See. I stepped inside and it seemed deceptively large compared to how small it looked on the outside. There were aisles of various groceries and other household supplies, and even some clothes racks. I had no idea how it was this large an operation. Most of the shoppers seemed fairly normal at first, though there were some people who you could tell preferred to do their shopping at night. I tried not to stare as I received a rather murderous-looking glare from one such individual who I must have let my eyes linger on too long. The staff also looked about the same as any other store's staff would look. Fairly diverse, and no one with an overly cheery or overly sullen mood about them. I did notice there was not a lot of talking near the checkouts. Moving on, I looked near the front, intent on finding a manager's office to inquire at. I felt hopeful when I saw a sign that I thought read, "Help Wanted." I felt a bit confused and less optimistic when I read the full content of the rather strange sign stating "Help Wanted," but not always needed. I was not sure how to take that, so I decided to look for someone to ask. As I approached the back office and went to knock on the door, I was interrupted by a large man with a blue store apron and a name badge indicating he was store manager, Benny. The large man welcomed me with a pleasant, though slightly forced, "Hello, can I help you find something today?" I was distracted by the almost pained expression on his face, like his smile would eventually shatter the muscles in his face if he kept it on for a moment longer. Brushing past the distraction, I remembered why I was there. Yes, I was actually looking to apply for a job here. I stated my earnest intent while gesturing to the help sign near the door. Benny stopped smiling and looked at the sign, and then looked as if he was about to say something when he held up a finger and pulled out a radio from his pocket. "Molly, what is the bagger situation today? How are we holding up staff-wise?" There was no immediate response. He smiled again in that disturbing way while he drummed his fingers along his tie as he awaited a response. His face wrinkled, and then he stated, "I'm sorry, I think we might be full at the moment, but thanks for your interest." He was about to usher me away when his radio barked to life, and I heard a static-laden voice on the line. I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded strange, and I thought I heard something like, "Rob, caught, problem," and bagger got bagged. I didn't know what to make of the weird bits I heard, but before I could think twice about it, I heard Benny mumble, "All right, but next time answer faster. It could have been a code black, and if you mess around with those customers, it is your ass next." I was still standing there in awkward silence when he wheeled around and his frustrated veneer vanished, and he was back to the awful fake smile as he loudly proclaimed, "Congratulations! There is an opening available now. Let's get you set up. Can you start tonight?" "Right now? As in tonight?" I asked, thoroughly surprised they would want me to start immediately and without any application or vetting process to speak of. "Yes, right now. Don't worry, we can sort out all the legal stuff later. But for tonight, we are actually a bit busier than normal, and we could use the help. First, though, let's talk terms and some mandatory paperwork." I was not sure what he meant, but I figured it might mean a salary negotiation. "Sure, What is the pay and benefits? I knew it was a little tacky to ask up front, but I needed that money badly, and Danny couldn't afford for me to get taken for a ride by someone lowballing my wages. $45 an hour is the pay for baggers, which is what we normally start people as. I almost gasped aloud. That was crazy for a grocery store bag boy. My surprise was apparent, and Benny held up a hand and cut off my next question, stating, "We value hard work and integrity here, and just a wee bit of discretion." He laughed aloud and slapped his knee. "But in all seriousness, there is a non-disclosure agreement we do need you to sign with the paperwork." He grinned again, and I thought the discretion bit, an NDA, was weird, but that was double what I was making at my day job, so I was overjoyed at the prospect. He continued, "Health coverage and dental are fully covered, but no life insurance. Those policies always have some trouble for some reason." His grin widened as he said the last part, and it looked even more fake than before. Despite some disturbing implications, I could scarcely hear the alarm bells in my head over my future payday. I had found a miracle. I would be able to get enough money in about a month working here, and my day job. I would be able to get Danny that treatment. I didn't need to be asked twice. I readily agreed to the offer. "Very good decision. Welcome to the Shar family. Ed, get out here and get our new hire an apron and a tag, and start with the simple version of the bagger training." An unpleasant-looking older man emerged from the back room and was holding an apron and moving with an odd gait that might have indicated some previous injury or the like. I forced a smile and introduced myself, but the man, Ed, as I heard his name, did not reciprocate. He looked me up and down and snorted derisively in a way that was hard not to take offense to. I let it go and waited for him to say something. Just before opening my mouth to ask when the training started, he cut me off and humorlessly asked, "You know baggin', feller?" "Baggin', like bagging groceries." I tried to clarify. He glared at me and just nodded his head. "Well, yeah. I mean, I have a general idea. I never worked at a grocery store before, but I think I know how things should be bagged, generally speaking." He paused an uncomfortably long time, and I was about to try and speak again when he snorted and gave a rather unpleasant throaty laugh that ended in a dry coughing fit. After he finished, he said, "Not like this. I'm guessing you don't. All right then, come on. I will show you how we do the baggin', and also the other rules. Reckon you better listen close. I ain't for repeating myself." I nodded my head and we started towards the back room when I heard the radio on his belt come to life, and a very nervous-sounding voice on the other line say, "Code black, repeat code black." Ed's face wrinkled in a way that somehow made him look even more annoyed than usual. God damn it all, more of them fellers already. He turned and left, angrily shouting some imperceptible grunts and complaints into the walkie, and left me near the back room dumbstruck and not sure of what to do next. What was a code black? Why was everyone afraid of them? I was about to go look for someone when I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I wheeled around to see a woman. The tag on her shirt read, "Assistant Manager, Molly." She smiled at me, and it did seem more genuine than some of the others here. "I'm sorry we have not met. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly, the AM here. I can help you with training and orientation. You can be a great asset here at She's." She held a hand toward the backroom doors and ushered me toward them. We moved into the backroom halls, and as I looked around, I saw several doors that looked like ice boxes. I figured they must store a lot of products to need that many freezers scattered about. Visible near the freezer's doors were shelves of other inventory. There were rows of boxes and pallets of strange things like chemicals, metalworking gear, various pieces of hardware, and crates that had gun manufacturers' names on them. I was wondering again just what kind of store this really was. Besides the odd inventory, it was also kind of a mess, and I was glad I wouldn't be the one having to sort all of it. We made our way to an office room with oppressively bright blue painted walls, like a kindergarten classroom. The sight reminded me of when Danny was in kindergarten, and I steeled my resolve against any difficulty this job might have. I needed to do this for her. The office was sparse. There was only a desk, some chairs, and a file cabinet. I did notice on the walls, painted on the bright blue, were some black characters that almost looked like calligraphy. More of those kanji were on the wall, and again I wondered what they meant. Before I could guess, Molly was motioning to me. She gestured for me to sit down at one of the only two chairs, in this case the one facing the desk. I sat down, and she sat opposite me. She looked over a few pieces of paper she had on a clipboard, and then smiled, turned around and started rummaging through a file cabinet. As I was waiting, a sudden shriek was heard outside, and I looked to the door and suppressed a gasp. Molly didn't react and kept looking for something. I thought maybe she hadn't heard it, and I was about to say something when she wheeled around with a large binder in hand and dropped it onto the desk with a loud crash. "Before training starts, please fill out this form for your safety and ours." She handed me a piece of paper that, when reading the details, seemed to be the non-disclosure agreement Benny had mentioned. I thought it was odd I had to sign this, but other hiring documents like tax, payroll, and healthcare paperwork were not required before starting. I considered they might be paying people under the table, which I hated to admit I might prefer, since no tax deduction meant I could save money faster. I signed all too quickly without realizing what I was agreeing to keep quiet and what the consequences imposed were if I didn't. Molly took the paper, looked it over, and said, "Good, that is settled. Well, let's get started. This is the employee handbook. We only have one, so you are going to be doing some light reading for a bit. Because we need the manpower now, though, I will go through it with you quickly, since Ed was indisposed." She grimaced when she said the last word and looked at her watch, and then adjusted a dial on her walkie-talkie. She looked back at me and resumed, "As a bagger, you are vital in ensuring customers leave satisfied with their product, and you are one of the last people they will see on the way out, except in certain circumstances." She cleared her throat loudly in time to some muffled noise. I thought I heard somewhere else in the back room. "Basic rules and code of conduct are as follows. You are to bag products to the customer's satisfaction. The first thing you are to ask customers is what type of bags they want. Whatever they say goes as far as how to bag things and with what bags. You are not to ask about or discuss the purchases of the customers, no matter how curious you are or how talkative they might be. No questions, period. Understood?" She slammed her fist on the binder, and I jumped back, startled as she looked at me. I stammered out a quick acknowledgement. Yes, understood." "Good," she said, and continued with the list. "No assistance may be provided to customers for loading or unloading things from their vehicles. If a customer requests help to their vehicle, do not under any circumstances assist or leave the building with them, or any customer at any time, regardless of the story they give you as to why they need help. It is our policy, and they know this. If requests persist or you are feeling intimidated or threatened, you are to press the yellow button at the end of each checkout by the bagging station. A security personnel will escort the offending customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment. Wait, detainment? They don't just kick them out." I thought that was weird. She continued with the next rule before I could ask about it. The most important rule. Occasionally, there will be a special bag request. You will know it when you hear it. If ordered, press the black button by the end of the checkout and proceed with code black protocol. These guests are normally our highest paying customers and often are here at the pleasure of Mr. Shy himself. They must be attended as quickly as possible. There it was, code black again. What special bag was she talking about? Ignoring the look of concern spreading over my face, she continued. Cell phones, smart watches, or quite literally anything that could be used as a recording device are strictly prohibited while on duty, both for our customers' sake and for our own. Store closes at 4:00 a.m. exactly. Any customers who remain will be escorted out. Only exception being any customers who are involved in a code black. No access is allowed to the basement and inventory back rooms. Only managers and stock employees allowed. Simple, right? Any questions? She asked while flashing another smile. Well, I did have a few questions about the... She cut me off mid-sentence, talking over me and saying, "Good. I knew you looked like a fast learner. Come on, let's get you out to the check stands and bagging." She grabbed my shoulder surprisingly hard and pulled me out of the office and back into the store proper. I saw a few customers look at me getting pulled along, and I saw some snickers, and I felt a bit embarrassed. I was led to a checkout, with a flickering number 3 next to it. The other 2 were busy with customers waiting in line to be helped by a cashier and bagger a few feet away from where I would be standing. We stopped, and Molly cleared her throat loudly to get the attention of a young man with dirty blonde hair and a rather unimpressed expression on his face. "Hello, Lee. This is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and try to be easy on him. It's his first day. I know it's busy, but we don't need another Rob situation so soon. Have fun, you two." She walked away without another word to the back room, and I was left there with Lee as I heard his name was staring at me. I tried to break the ice. "Hi, my name is..." "Save it," he responded abruptly. I don't want to get attached just in case. I liked Rob. He was my friend. And now, well, now it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just do your job and follow the rules, and you should be fine. I didn't know how to respond to the blunt introduction, but I figured he seemed nicer than that Ed guy, so I just walked up to the bagging station and gave him a mock salute and tried to put a smile on my face. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through, and Lee wordlessly scanned their items. I proceeded to grab a few nearby bags when I felt a sharp kick in my leg. Lee was glaring at me like I had just slapped his mother. What? I thought I was supposed to... Then I looked at the customer who was frowning at me, and I remembered. "Hello, what type of bag would you like?" The customer, an older woman, sneered at me and finally accepted the question and said flatly, "Paper, please," and did her best to pretend I didn't exist while I was bagging her items. Mostly groceries, produce, meat, and dairy. There were a few odd pieces, like a set of kitchen knives and what looked like boxes of some sort of firearm ammunition. I was about to ask about them when I remembered the rules, tried to ignore it and just carry on. She left wordlessly and more customers piled into our line. As the night went on, I started to see less normal items and more disturbing things. One customer had bought zip ties, large volumes of what looked like medical-grade sedatives, and several bags of candy. Another bought an ungodly amount of various weapons ammunition and several large fruits like watermelon and honeydew. I thought he might be just shooting some fruit for target practice until I saw what appeared to be a Kevlar vest and an uncomfortable amount of alcohol. After a dozen very disturbing customers came through, I finally found someone who seemed a bit friendly. She was a kindly old woman who seemed to enjoy speaking to me, and by all accounts was very nice. It was a much-needed reprieve, and I actually enjoyed talking with her. Her name was Marge, and she was just buying some baking supplies, eggs, butter, flour, spices, all pretty normal things. "You simply must try my raspberry tart. It is divine. I will bring some by next time, or better yet, I think I still have some in my car. Won't you be a doll and help an old woman with her groceries?" I was about to accept when I saw Lee's face go blank, and he just shook his head. I looked back at Marge, and she had a wide grin on her face, and I looked down at the second half of her groceries yet to be bagged. There were containers of various chemicals, including rat poison, bleach, and ammonia. I tried to speak, but I froze, and she asked again. "Come on, dearie. My hip is in bad shape after my fall. It will only be a moment, and you can have a treat and a nice tip as well." Her grin shifted in a way that made me very uncomfortable, and I struggled to speak. but finally blurted out, "No, thank you, ma'am. Store policy. We are not to escort customers out of the store under any conditions." Her grin vanished, and grimace of anger flared up briefly. "Oh well, your loss, I suppose. I would have made it spectacular. I thought I might get one of the new ones before you figured it out. Next time, Sonny, I might just find where you live and make a house call." She winked at me and pushed her cart away, and I was shocked and horrified at the implications of what had just happened. Lee elbowed me in the side and gestured to the customer who had taken her place, and I was forced to just ignore another uncomfortable encounter that night. After a long shift of bagging goods for an assortment of disturbing individuals, I realized my work was done when a screeching PA system informed everyone in the store that it is now 4 a.m. and we are closing. If you have not purchased your items already, then you must leave. If you are loading goods, a reminder that no employees may leave with you. You must take them and leave. If you do not, they will be confiscated. Any customers lingering in store will be confiscated as well. Geez, they were not joking about the strict closing time. A large group of people I had not seen before moved through the aisles with flashlights and batons. They must have been the store's security team. They seemed overkill and intense, more like paramilitary than grocery store security guards. They were looking for any stragglers, apparently. I thought just then of the weird announcement about people left behind being confiscated as well, and it seemed kind of concerning with how serious they were about everyone getting the hell out on time. I was ushered out as well, along with the other staff who left wordlessly. I tried to make a quip to Lee, asking if there was ever overtime, but he just kept his head down and ignored my joke. I did not know what kind of operation this was, but the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I made a mistake in taking the job. I had to keep it for a while longer at least, until I could save enough for Danny's treatment. I worked at Shivers for a few more weeks of uncomfortable conversations and ghoulish and unspeakable items being bagged at the caprice of disturbing and malign customers. I saw 2 code blacks in that time, at least, I should say. I overheard them. Lee told me not to look and try to avoid the attention of the customers who ordered them. After the first one in my second week of work, I did not see Jay, the other bag boy, again. Lee warned me not to ask about him, and I was getting increasingly terrified of what would happen if I got one as well. What the hell were the code blacks? The only good news I had was that the store paid bi-weekly, and to my surprise, it seemed like almost no taxes were taken out of my paycheck. I had almost a full $2,800 from the first 2 weeks of work. A little more, and with a bit of the money I saved up from my other job, I could afford Danny's treatment. I just needed to make it 2 more weeks, and then I could quit and never see the awful place again. I managed to avoid any trouble for my 3rd week, but in my last week, I had a disastrous run-in with a customer. It was what started a sequence of events so horrible that the conclusion still threatens my family's safety and terrifies me to this day. It was about 11:00 p.m. and things were going okay. Some of the managers were poking around, and there was an odd air of concern and anticipation in the air. Lee told me that the owner would be stopping by at some point that night, Mr. Shy himself. I was trying to ask more about the owner when a large bald man came to our checkout. He had horn-rimmed glasses and a large jowly face that was fixed in an leering stare that made me feel very uncomfortable. He tried to chat with me, but I got very bad vibes from the man. I tried to ignore him, but he kept pressing it. "Ah, come on, man. Lighten up. I see you are new here. What's it like working here? You see any real action?" Mr. Response was simply asking, "What type of bag would you like, sir?" "I will show you my bag if you show me yours," he said, then let out a belly laugh that almost knocked his glasses off as he kept smiling at me with a sick gleam in his eyes. After a moment, he finally said, "Plastic's fine, I suppose. Just trying to lighten the mood. You look tense, like you could use a break." I ignored him while bagging copious amounts of junk food, a pair of pliers, lube, condoms, and various chemicals like bleach and OxyClean. I had become slightly inured to the worst of the colorful characters and the concerning wares they purchased, but this one seemed particularly loathsome. Yeah, you could definitely use a break. Hey, I know. I can give you a little pick-me-up in my car. I am right outside. Help me take this stuff out, and I'm your huckleberry. I couldn't even formulate a response. I couldn't think over my skin crawling away to another zip code. I resolved to just fall back on the rulebook line and proceeded to inform him that we are not allowed to leave the store with customers for any reason. To my horror and disgust, this one did not let the matter go. Ah, come on. You're just playing hard to get. Seriously, I'm sure I can pay you more than these people. Come on, what do you say? Come on out, and we can talk about it. I repeated the rules again while bagging the last of his items, but he would not let it go. Hey, listen to me, you little fuck. You think you are too good for me. You think you are some kind of hot shit. Huh? Well, you are coming outside now. No one ignores me like this. I have a special treat in store for stubborn pricks who don't listen to me. His face was bright red, and he was practically spitting the words at me. I panicked at first, but then I remembered the button by the bagging station. I pressed it discreetly while trying to hold my ground, shrinking slightly back to the vile tirade of the deranged individual. I took a step back, and he moved forward, looking like he was going to grab me. To my surprise, a large gloved hand fell on his shoulder. I looked behind him, and a nearly 7-foot-tall man clad in a weird cross between police riot gear and military-grade armor was holding him back. The customer turned around and started to yell at security. Do you pricks know who the fuck I am? I know the owner. You will all be sorry you crossed me. I am going to... And a sickening crunch was heard, followed by the man going limp. The guard holstered a now bloodied security baton and bent down over the dazed form of the customer. His eyes were glazed, and he likely had a concussion, but he was still conscious and tried to speak when the security guard seized him by the throat and hoisted him back to his feet. The customer tried to whimper out a soft and confused sounding, "Wait, wait." Before he was punched so hard in the chest, I thought I heard his ribs break from where I was standing. The helmeted face of the guard turned to me, looked me up and down, and asked, what type of bag was he using? I had no idea what that had to do with anything, but I answered, plastic. He was using plastic bags. I heard a chuckle under the mask and helmet of the guard, and he said, too bad he didn't pick paper. And the guard dumped out one of the man's bags. As he was trying to rise to his feet, the guard placed the plastic bag around the customer's head and tightened it. To my shock and horror, he proceeded to easily strangle him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and after a few moments it was over. I was speechless, and another guard came over, and they took the customer's body on a stretcher to the back room. Benny, the store manager, had appeared out of nowhere and spoke to us. I am sorry you had to see that, but I am glad you are safe. We take threats very seriously here, and know you all need to be safe in such dangerous times. That is why we keep this place safe from dangerous people like that. I trust what happened here will also be safe and secure with you, right? After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that knowing where you live, right? He smiled at us and left to the back rooms. I understood the veiled threat and realized I would not be able to tell any real authorities or report on this madhouse. Despite that encounter, my night was not done yet, and the worst was yet to come. Lee would not speak to me about what we both saw, and we tried to move on with the night and pretend what we saw happen didn't happen. It was getting close to 4 a.m., and we would be able to close soon. I was so close to being done with this place and getting out of there and home to my little girl. I just needed to hang on for a couple more days. There were only a few more customers lining up at the checkouts when something odd happened. A well-dressed man went to checkout number 2, and they shut off their light and said the scanner was not working anymore. It seemed fishy since it had been fine all night, but when the guarded looks and concerned faces flashed before me and then back at the well-dressed man, I realized that they might know something I didn't. My heart sank as I realized he might be one of those special customers. I looked over at Lee and he was visibly sweating and fumbling with the cash register. The man sauntered over to out-checkout. He had a small basket with what looked like fine sewing thread, thimbles, and tailoring articles. It also contained a hacksaw, a plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets that seemed to clash with the sewing equipment. By itself, I did not think anything of it, and I relaxed a bit. Lee was pale and wordlessly scanned the small items he had. After they came down the conveyor, the man turned to me, tipped his hat, and introduced himself. "Good evening, my friend. My name is Henry Jaspin. I work for a little antique cloth shop, and I am here to get some materials." I relaxed a bit more. This did not seem too strange. I proceeded to ask, "What type of bags would you like today, Mr. Jaspin?" "Well, my good fellow, I should think paper for the small bits you see here. Indeed, I found all the tailoring kit I need to make work anyone would be proud of. But what I really need today are some raw materials. So, the bag I really need will be a body bag tonight, preferably the larger variety." My mind was racing, my heart was pounding. Did he just say he needed a body bag? I was about to ask him to repeat it when it dawned on me. The rules had said, "A special bag request. You will know it when you hear it." I realized I had just encountered my first code black. I forced my trembling body to move, and I pressed the black button under the bagging station. I heard an alert on nearby walkie-talkies. Code black on number 3. Confirmations were heard all around. There was a burst of motion near the back, and I handed Mr. Jaspin his bag of smaller merchandise as Benny approached us. "Good evening, Mr. Jaspin." He managed to choke out the words, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Oh, Benny, don't worry. I know what I asked for, and though you are a big fella, I wouldn't dream of picking you. We go too far back. Besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" Mr. Jaspin let out a howl of laughter, and Benny followed suit with a nervous chuckle of his own. "Your new employee, however, he has a nice strong jaw and broad shoulders. Not as much meat, though." He looked me over, and I was confused and terrified at the implication of whatever it was he was talking about. As he was eyeing me, Benny spoke up, saying, "Of course, you are free to pick as you please, but if I could suggest an option. We just picked up a rather unruly fellow who was just processed a few hours ago, and he is on the larger side. Perhaps he would be a good alternative." "Of course, Benny. You and your new hire lead the way." I followed Benny in between him and Mr. Jaspin, who was behind us. We went into the back and then through keycard-locked door that lead into the basement. Benny shot me an apologetic look as we descended into the basement, and I beheld what was down there for the first time. The place was very dark and freezing. I thought it might be another type of meat locker, and I was not too far off. When the light switched on, I had to stifle a gasp of shock and horror. As soon as the room was illuminated, I saw it all. We were surrounded on all sides by rows and rows of body bags. Almost all of them were full. Corpses leered out of many of them, all in various states of decomposition. I thought I was going to be sick. It looked like a morgue. I realized that we had been dealing with these products the whole time. I laughed quietly to myself in despair when I realized the options were paper, plastic, and apparently body bags. I thought of the conversation of selecting a person. I also thought of the other people who had handled code blacks and had not been seen again, like Rob. Rob was bagged. I stood there, mouth agape, trembling at the horror of the nightmare room before me. While it all unfolded in stark terror to me, Mr. Jaspin calmly perused through the inventory of corpses. He would scrutinize them, pinching a cheek here and there and giving a tut-tut or moan of disdain. He came across the body Benny had pointed out, and he said, My, he is a big fellow. A lot of material they would love to use. Skin is a little dry in places, a touch of eczema. That is all right though, Benny, old chum. You have a deal. I will tell Mr. Shi. Benny sighed in relief and started to guide me out of that nightmare dungeon. While leaving, I caught a look at Mr. Jaspin's pick, and I held my hand over my mouth to avoid gasping out loud. It was the belligerent customer from earlier. A large dent on his face from when it was smashed in by security. The face had a deathly pallor, and his eyes were still leering, even in death. Why in the hell was he down here in a body bag? And why did it sound like he was just purchased? My mind was grasping for rationalizations for how and why this was all happening. Suddenly, Mr. Jaspin caught my hand and proceeded to place a card into my palm. As for you, my fine friend, we would love to have a worker like you at our establishment. She runs a tight ship here, but we are a bit more free-spirited at the tailor. Take care. And he departed with his horrific purchase. I was ushered upstairs in a daze, and I vaguely heard Benny talking with someone. I snapped back to my senses and saw a new face looking at me. He was an older man, and he had very intense, unblinking eyes that were boring into my soul as I stood there. He spoke to me in a stern but oddly soothing voice. I know you might be unsettled by what you saw, but she knew, and the means to access it are natural parts of life. It is what you saw. It is what we sell. We sell it in all its forms. Why, it is even in our name. I hope you understand and do not consider anything foolish over the next few days. We value your work, but understand that some people lack the fortitude to deal with what our business does. Just don't forget that when you head back home to your house on 4th Avenue, the large cherry tree at the end of the street is blossoming and looks beautiful. You should take your daughter to see while it still blooms. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed while departing. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but I knew I was in trouble. My mind was a jumble, and besides the imminent threat, I found myself considering something unrelated, a name. I thought about what Mr. Shai had said about She Knew and how we sell it. I looked again at the sign as I was leaving She's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not think anything of it at first, but I looked closer at the kanji by the first word. Looking up the meaning on my phone, I saw it was indeed the kanji for she. She sometimes used when counting as the number 4 in Japanese, but more often associated with something else. The dawning horror and simplicity of the name made sense now. Sishir more often translates to death. I had worked almost an entire month at Death's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not go back. I quit. I will find another way to make the rest of the money I need. My family's safety is what is important now, and I know it is not safe for me and Danny here anymore. How could it be, when Mr. Death knows where you live? My family experienced something I can't explain, and we've stopped talking to each other. I don't know what to do. I don't want to sound crazy. We're normal people. If any of this sounds familiar, please reach out to me. I need to know what's happening to my family. It's hard to know where to begin. I don't know when this all started, but it hasn't stopped. I live with my wife and 2 college-age daughters. I'm a private chef. My wife is a teacher. We live in a suburb outside a coastal U.S. city, in an 80s-era planned community where every house and street feels like a mirror image. Crisp lawns, HOAs, everyone knows everyone. The people are a little bland, but we have a yard and a pool, and we can pay for groceries, and we can barely afford to send our kids to college out of state. We were lucky, I thought. My first experience with the supernatural was last spring. Okay, you're really gonna hate this one, Sarah said. It was Monday, my Saturday, and I was grilling vegetables by the pool. My eldest daughter, a born trickster, sat on the least broken pool chair, bombarding me with the most willfully ignorant pop music she could find, or terrible cooking videos, or clips of classic cars refurbished with electric motors. Anything to get a reaction out of her poor Gen X dad. Please no. How about the guy who makes things out of chocolate? I countered, hoping for a compromise. I'm looking for the Kings game you went to in 2006, where they lost 1-10. Sarah jabbed. I'm burning your food on purpose, I quipped. Wait, Sarah said, suddenly still. Whatever this thing is, whatever these things are, my wife and my daughters feel it before I do. I don't know if they're more sensitive to it or what, but they always know something is there before me. Call it women's intuition. What's wrong? As I said it, I remember it got very quiet, like the volume for the outside world turned all the way down. The birds, the traffic, and the white noise of suburbia went silent. I couldn't even hear the sizzle of the vegetables cooking 2 feet in front of me. The lack of sound didn't bother me, however, because I saw something in the sky. A disc. I didn't want to see a disc. But I saw a disc. It was made of metal, perfectly smooth, no rivets, no seams, no wings, no exhaust. A perfectly formed metal disc, 15 feet wide, like 2 contact lenses stuck together, just sitting there. There were lights, big ones, bright in the sun even in the middle of the day, moving all around it. I remember thinking, really? Part of me was exasperated at how, well, dumb it looked, like an old movie model. Only somehow I knew it was real, and I was being watched. And then I felt the fear. If you ask me, I think the craft makes people feel it. I don't know. I know it sounds crazy. It's like a madness. It fills you up, cold, just pure terror. As soon as your eyes see a craft, in a few seconds your mind blanks, and you feel only fear of the thing in front of you. The disc-shaped ones, and the triangle-shaped ones, they always seem to broadcast the fear. I'd never felt panic like that. I know how to deal with it a little easier now. But back then I wanted to put my daughter in the car and drive as far away from the thing as possible. Only I was completely frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only move my eyes, and even that took tremendous effort. I struggled to look in my daughter's direction and saw she was equally paralyzed. Her pupils turned to me, then back to the craft. And we did that for a few seconds, trying to process what was happening, looking to the disc, to each other, and back. It was agony. And then the disc was gone. I was looking right at it. It didn't fly away. It didn't zoom off at incredible speeds. It was like it stopped existing while I was staring at it. When it was gone, I could move, and I could breathe, and my daughter started crying, and I comforted her, and we swore and shook. What the hell was that? Are you okay? I remember we both asked that. I remember reaching for my phone, but it was dead. Sarah's phone was dead too. We went inside to charge them, still in a daze. Your face is really red, said Sarah, concerned. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. She was right. My face was burned, like a sunburn. I wear sunblock every day and often work long hours in the sun. I never get sunburned. I'll get you some aloe, Sarah said, retreating into the downstairs bathroom. I glanced at the oven clock. It was 3 hours later than I expected. 3 hours, I muttered. We were only outside for a few minutes, right? Sarah's eyes widened in realization. What happened to us? Sarah said softly. We were missing time. I don't know where that time went. I don't know what happened during that time. Time feels weird around these things. It's hard to describe. We didn't talk much for a while. We just kind of sat in the living room, scrolling our phones. The evening darkened. I remember thinking I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. My wife Lauren and our youngest daughter Danny, returning home from work, broke us out of our malaise. A UFO burned your face, Lauren said, incredulous. Lauren was always funny, even when she wasn't trying to be. I won't lie, it sounded dumb. I tried to think of how to word it better. I saw it too. It was really weird, Sarah said, seriously. You sure you weren't standing too close to the grill again? Danny teased. Her pants were covered in flour and oil, her hair pulled back. Danny worked at a restaurant, despite my objections. You're supposed to make the food in the restaurant, not on your outfit, I teased back. Danny smirked. She liked kitchen talk. She was a lot like me in that way. I don't understand. Did you provoke them? Why'd they come all the way from space just to burn you? Lauren asked, spreading student tests on the dining room table. Did it look like the ones we saw when we were kids? Danny asked Sarah. No, this one was different. It was a different shape, Sarah said, shaking her head. What are you talking about? Which ones? I asked, confused. Do you remember the night we saw the blue elf? Danny asked. Memories of Sarah and Danny as kids flooded my brain. One night, a brilliant blue light in the sky. Sarah and Danny ran into our room to hide, the feeling of someone watching. The memory filled me with dread. Feeling uncomfortable, I tried to change the subject. I don't want to cook tonight. Let's order out. What should we get? I said, presenting a distraction. We ate dinner as a family that night. We talked about normal things. I tried to seem unbothered, but I was obsessively turning over the sighting of the disc in my mind. What was that? Why couldn't we move? The feeling stayed with me long after the meal had ended and the dishes were done. I remember that was our last normal dinner. I wish I'd made more of an effort that night. We'll never be the same family we were then. I guess before I tell you about that night, I should explain what an orb is. An orb is a kind of floating sphere. It looks kind of like a blue basketball filled with spaghetti-looking strands of something. It has a mind, I think. I don't know what these things are. From what I can tell, they are unknowable. They will harm you. If you see an orb, my advice is to run. They can move through walls. The first night with the orbs changed all of our lives forever. We stopped talking after that night. I don't know if I can write it down in detail yet. Even this was hard. I read something recently. Scientists have communicated with apes via sign language since the 1960s. In all that time, apes have never asked a question. Maybe they can't conceive of what a question is. Their mind just can't form the reasoning to understand how to think of one. I think that's what it's like when we see these things, these orbs or discs or whatever, like we're seeing something we can't comprehend. I don't think we think about aliens the right way. They're not from another planet. They're from somewhere else entirely. Something has happened to my family. Something happened and we're still dealing with it, and I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to tell people. We're afraid to talk about it with each other. I'm not even sure if anyone will read this. The world needs to know what's out there, what my family experienced. My family can't be the first. There must be others. If you're still with me after these ramblings, thank you. The next part will not be easy to write, but you deserve to know the full truth about what the orbs did to us, what they're capable of. For now, I present to you this information. I do not think we live in a completely material world. There are supernatural forces all around us, and most of them are unkind. Be careful with how you think and what you think of. A new flyer came in the mail. I opened it up and started to read. I couldn't believe my eyes. Hey, hun, come look at this, I said, pointing towards a section of the grocery store flyer. Look how cheap these things are on this sale. $0.49 for 2 cans of spaghetti sauce. There must have been a printing error, I exclaimed. Printed in large bold letters at the top of the page, read McCaesar Family Grocery. Never heard of that place, I thought to myself. Look here, 2 packs of spaghetti noodles for $0.50, my wife Claire stated. I peered up from the flyer and gazed at Claire's face, grinning ear to ear. Spaghetti for dinner tonight, I said. Yes, please, she responded with a grin. I peered toward my watch. It read 9:35 a.m. I finished my coffee and put on my jacket when Claire called out, "Safe driving, Lee." "Don't worry, I'm not in a rush. They are open all day," I exclaimed back. I opened the door and headed out. I got into my car and turned the key. I glanced at the flyer again to find the store's address. 1180 HWY 32. I typed it into Google Maps. The location looked like an old, abandoned Walmart about an hour and 45 minutes away. I live in a small town called Mackinac City, Michigan, and the store's in Alpena, Michigan. I put my car in reverse and started my journey onto Highway 32. Everything was fine until about an hour in. Stretched as far as I could see was the biggest line of traffic I have ever seen. The word about the flyer must have gotten out fast. I let out a moan of frustration and started to scroll through social media, moving every 2 minutes or so. Finally, around 11:15 a.m., the traffic began to clear. As I approached Alpena, I noticed that almost every car that was a part of the traffic jam was turning right onto Highway 23. Weird. I thought they were heading to the store as well, I thought. I continued on my journey. I watched the trees slowly fade into buildings as I approached Alpena. I stared at the billboard outside of the store as I approached it. I flicked on my blinker and turned into the parking lot. The lot was surprisingly empty, only housing around 5 to 6 cars. I backed into the closest spot to the door and shut the car off. I stepped out and took a deep breath of the fresh air, stretching my legs. I peered towards the store windows and paused. 4 cashiers were staring at me, smiling through the window. I anxiously smiled and gave them a slight wave. No reaction. My smile faded. I popped open the trunk, grabbed a few reusable bags, and headed inside. As the sliding doors opened, a little chime played over the store's PA system, followed by a woman's voice. "Welcome to McCaesar Family Grocery. We hope you enjoy your shopping experience." I grabbed a cart out of the receptacle and started to browse the aisles. I realized that there were no price tags on anything, so I went up to the front to grab a flyer. I didn't see any in the baskets, so I asked an employee. It was a young woman, mid-20s. She was looking completely straight, with a huge, painful-looking smile. Hey there, can I have a flyer, please?" She ignored me. Excuse me? Can I have a flyer?" She turned to look at me. Her eyes terrified me. They looked empty, soulless even. I began to stutter my words out of fear. Do you, Without saying a word or breaking eye contact, she picked up a flyer from underneath her counter and handed it to me. Thanks. I took a deep breath and walked away, peering behind me to see her still staring. I started to calm down as I shopped. I was texting my wife about the weird employees, but they weren't going through. I decided to give her a call to ask her about what spaghetti sauce to buy. I typed in her number and put the phone up to my ear. It rang 2-3 times when Claire answered. "Hey babe, how's it going?" she said. Not too bad, I guess. Anyway, what kind of sauce do you want me to buy? They have garlic, regular, spicy." As I peered at the different sauces, I caught an employee out of the corner of my eye. It was an older man. He didn't match the rest of the employees I have seen. This man was frowning. He looked really unhappy. He was at the other end of the aisle, about 20 feet away, staring at me. I froze. I started to get creeped out when I heard Claire in my ear. "Hello? Lee, are you there?" I snapped out of my trance and looked back at the shelf. Yeah, hello? Sorry, some guy is staring. Never mind, he's gone, I said anxiously. "What do you mean? Are you okay, Lee?" she said in a worried tone. "Yeah, I'm good. Anyway, what kind of sauce do you want?" I said. Let's try the garlic one. That's the flavor my mom always uses," she said. "Her spaghetti is the best. I'm gonna grab a bunch so we have them," I said excitedly. Good idea. I'll see you later, hun. Be safe, she said. Love you, bye. I ended the call. I peered back up to where the man was and looked back down at my cart. I took another deep breath and started to push the cart when the PA chimed again. Customers, please keep all devices off at all times to avoid interference with our PA system. Thank you. This was starting to get weird. I need to grab a few more things and get the hell out of here. I continued through the aisles when I received a text from Claire. What store did you say you were at again? It read. I replied, McCaesar Family Grocery. Why? There was a short pause before she typed again. It says online that it closed down 2 years ago. I froze. My heart started beating out of my chest. I looked up to see a man enter my aisle, pushing a cart full of items, smiling. To get checked out, I had to pass him. I started to approach, my heart beating faster every step I took. These prices are amazing, the man said. He had a slight British accent and sounded like a droid. Yay. My heart was in my throat. The man stared at me for a moment and spoke again. Do you own a mobile device? If so, you should shut it off to ensure you are following the McCaesar Family Grocery terms. I didn't know what to say. I was frozen. His smile slowly started to fade into a frown. I began to continue toward the store counter when he said something from behind me. Rule breaker. You are a rule breaker, Lee. I whipped my head around as fast as I could. The man was gone, his cart frozen where he was standing. Another chime played throughout the store, this time a note deeper. Attention customers, the store will be closing on May 20th, 2022. You have about -2 years until we close. Everything must go. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Lee is a rule breaker. Lee is a rule breaker. I gasped and looked around frantically. At that moment, every employee started to walk towards me, never breaking their gaze. On their faces, a frown, tears streaming from their eyes. All of them were repeating the same thing. The store is closing. The store is closing. I pushed the cart into the closest one, which made him topple like a mannequin. I sprinted out of the store and jumped in my car. I was shaking badly and freaking out, so I dropped the keys on the floor of my car. I bent over to pick them up. As I got back up and turned the key, half of the employees were now surrounding my car. At my driver's side window was the lady who gave me the flyer. She started to lean back from the waist and began slamming her head into the window, cracking it. I put the car into gear and slammed on the gas pedal, sending a few of them flying. I looked in my rearview mirror as I drove away. All the employees were staring at me, smiling once again. Slowly, they began to turn around and walk back into the store, never breaking their gaze with me. I went 30 over the whole way home. The highway was empty. My heart didn't stop racing until I was home. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't even want to get out thinking that one could be still attached to my car. My wife came out to greet me and help bring in the groceries I didn't have. I jumped out of the car and latched onto her, sobbing. What's wrong? Lee, what happened? She said, worried. We went inside and I told her everything. Surprisingly, she believed me. This happened about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still struggling to sleep at night. I have done everything in my power to find information about this grocery store, but nothing is coming up. I can't even find the flyer I originally had. Claire said she left it on the kitchen counter and didn't touch it. I'm not sure what happened to me or who those things are, but I took one thing away from this whole experience. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.